Every startup begins the same way, with a person. Not with an investor, not with an algorithm, not with a PowerPoint deck. With a single spark in the mind of someone who refuses to accept reality as it is. It's the same in the Middle East. Dubai built the infrastructure. Riyadh offered the vision. Qatar created the laboratories. But it's people who give all of this meaning. Because technology without the human element is just an empty promise. And the Middle East has learned that innovation without emotion won't survive even one sandstorm. Behind the scenes of futuristic cities and laboratories, there is another world. Less orderly, more human, full of contradictions. It's the world of Cairo, where startups are born out of chaos and survival. The world of Oman, where innovation wears the face of silence and calm. The world of Bahrain, quietly building the future of fintech. And the world of women who are entering business as if stepping onto a new continent, with courage, but also with a kind of delicacy that changes the tone of the entire conversation about success. Each of these countries and each of these people has their own version of the startup dream. In Cairo, success means surviving a week without a power outage. In Oman, creating something small but lasting. In Bahrain, combining the tradition of Islamic finance with the modern market. For women from Dubai, Saudi Arabia, and Egypt, it's a struggle not only with competition, but also with history. And that's the beauty of this transformation. Because the Middle East has never been equal. It's always been a mosaic. And that mosaic is becoming its strength. Startups in the desert don't grow in silence. They are born in street noise, in the buzz of bazaars, in the rhythm of prayers and push notifications. Every sound, every word, every emotion becomes part of a larger story about courage. About people who don't wait for better times, but build them with their own hands. About a generation that doesn't really know the word impossible. This part of the Middle East story is the most human. It's not about capital, but about heart. Not about huge investments, but about the daily fight for meaning. Because in a region that has spent centuries learning how to survive, technology isn't a trend. It's an instinct, a way of living. In this episode, we'll talk about 4 faces of that transformation, about Egypt's chaos that somehow works, about the quiet balance of Oman and Bahrain, and about the women of the Middle East who are writing a new chapter in the history of innovation. Everywhere where patriarchy, rigid hierarchy, and stagnation dominated not so long ago, you can now hear something new. The pulse of the human spirit. A pulse beating in the rhythm of startups. Because if Dubai, Riyadh, and Qatar show what the infrastructure of innovation looks like, then Egypt, Oman, Bahrain, and the region's women show why innovation matters. They are the ones who make progress more than an economic project. They make it emotional. They turn business into a human story. And they turn the Middle East into a place that has stopped copying the future and started writing it in its own handwriting. Egypt, startup chaos that works. Cairo, doesn't sleep. Ever. The city breathes loudly, unevenly, as if it could explode at any moment from its own energy. The sound of car horns, calls, conversations, prayers, and laughter creates a symphony of disorder that many foreigners simply can't stand. But it's precisely in that chaos that life is born. And it's in that chaos that startups are born. Because Egypt, more than any other country in the Middle East, understands one thing. Innovation isn't a luxury. It's survival. In Dubai, they build labs. In Riyadh, strategies. In Cairo, improvisation. Here, a startup isn't an air-conditioned office. It's a table in a cafe, a router under the table, and 5 phones plugged into one socket. Founders in Cairo don't have deep venture capital behind them, but they have something many investors lack: desperation. And desperation is the best fuel for ideas. Every day is a stress test. Every internet connection is a small victory. Every client is a story, not a number. On Tahrir Square, where the 2011 revolution began, you can now find the offices of young companies. Symbolically, in the very place where Egyptians regained their voice, they are now reclaiming their future. Medical projects, financial apps, logistics services are being launched. Visita, a platform for booking doctor's appointments. Max AB, groceries delivered to small shops. Instabug, a tool for tracking bugs in apps. Every one of these companies was born out of a daily need, out of frustration, out of a desire to make life easier in a country full of contradictions. Egypt doesn't have the infrastructure of the UAE or the money of Saudi Arabia, but it has people, over 100 million of them. And that's where its strength lies. Every problem is an opportunity here. Every gap in the system, an invitation to act. In a country where government offices can vanish for a week and the power can go out 3 times a day, startups become a parallel world, an alternative operating system for daily life. If the state doesn't work, an app does. If the clerk doesn't pick up, the chatbot responds. If there's no job, there's freelancing. On the rooftops of Cairo, between antennas and satellite dishes, you can see young people sitting with laptops. Those are their offices. Sometimes they borrow the neighbor's Wi-Fi, sometimes they run on a generator, but they create. They write code, design, come up with ideas. Amid noise, dust, and heat, ideas are born that later get copied by Western companies. Egypt has become an unexpected supplier of the raw material of the future, talent. Because in a world where you can buy almost anything, you still can't buy talent. And Egypt has a surplus of it. The most beautiful part is that Egyptian success never looks like it does in an ad. There are no luxury offices or black limousines. There is laughter, sweat, dust, and cables. People staying up at night with a glass of tea and a vision of a better tomorrow. Their motivation is simple. They want to earn enough to live. But from that simplicity, something special is born. Authenticity. Startups from Cairo aren't created for press coverage, but for people. They work because they have to, and maybe that's exactly why they work so well. In university corridors, between posters from the revolution and portraits of former presidents, new generations of programmers are growing up. Egypt, which for decades exported its brightest minds, is starting to keep them. More and more young people are saying, "We don't want to leave. We want to change something here." For them, success isn't measured in dollars, but in possibilities. In the fact that they can build something with their own hands. Of course, chaos has its price. Bureaucracy, inflation, instability, that's daily life. But for Cairo's founders, these aren't obstacles, they're the landscape. They've learned to work in hardship, so every improvement in the system feels like a holiday. Egypt resembles an orchestra without a conductor. Everyone plays their own part, but somehow the whole still makes sense. And when, from time to time, they manage to play together, you can hear the music of the future. In the evening, when the city sinks into orange light and the Nile reflects neon signs, Cairo looks like the nervous system of the Middle East. Impulses stream from every district, in Shubra, Heliopolis, Mahdi, Nasser City, in hundreds of tiny offices. A quiet revolution is underway. People who have nothing are building something that changes everything. And even though the world often looks at Egypt condescendingly, a new economy of courage is being born here. Egypt doesn't need miracles. It needs Wi-Fi, electricity, and people who aren't afraid to try. And that's exactly what it has in abundance. Cairo is a laboratory of chaos that proves order is overrated. That sometimes, to create something big, you have to act against logic. That when the system breaks down, you can build a new one, with a laptop, hope, and 4 friends who believe that this time it'll work. Because in Egypt, innovation isn't the dream of the rich, it's the hope of the poor. And that is exactly why it works. Oman and Bahrain, the silence that teaches balance. Not every revolution makes noise. Some begin in silence. That's exactly how it is in Oman and Bahrain, 2 small countries that don't need fireworks to change the world. They don't have Dubai's ambition or Riyadh's spectacle. They don't race for the tallest tower or the biggest investment record. Their strength is calm. And calm in the Middle East is rarer than oil. Oman is like a breath after the storm. Mountains, sea, and desert form a landscape that teaches humility. Nothing happens quickly here. Innovation is not born out of rush, but out of observation. Young Omanis learn differently than their neighbors. They don't chase success. They build it slowly. Their startups are small, but carefully thought out. Every idea has to make sense for society. It's not about profit, but about balance. In a country where the past still breathes right next to the present, Technology has to have a soul. In the capital, Muscat, the Oman Technology Fund was created, an institution that doesn't look like a typical VC fund. Instead of promising instant returns, it offers calm. It gives time, space, a mentor. Instead of forcing growth, it helps founders mature. Omani startups focus on ecology, renewable energy, tourism, and education. Because for Oman, technology isn't a tool of domination, it's a way to preserve harmony with nature. In valleys where camels once grazed, solar farms now stand. Where they once built forts, you now find co-working spaces. And young entrepreneurs look at the world not through the lens of competition, but of responsibility. Oman is the opposite of Dubai. It doesn't shine, it doesn't seduce with extravagance, but it attracts with people. In every startup, you can see a generation that grew up between the desert and the ocean, between silence and prayer. They know that true success is the kind that lasts. That's why in Oman, every app, every project, every new solution is like a prayer. Quiet, focused, sincere. Bahrain, even smaller, took a different path. There, innovation is like water. It seeps into everything but makes no fuss. Bahrain was the first Gulf country to truly grasp that the future of finance doesn't lie in physical banks, but in code. It created Bahrain FinTech Bay, one of the region's most innovative financial hubs. A laboratory of digital solutions where Islamic finance meets blockchain and conservative investors learn to think like programmers. In Manama, Bahrain's capital, you won't find a forest of skyscrapers like in Dubai. But you will find people who can think big. Their goal isn't to dominate the market, but to humanize it. They build platforms that help small entrepreneurs, apps that make life easier for families, payment systems aligned with religious values. In a country that has been a trading post for centuries, fintech has become a natural continuation of tradition. Bahrain didn't invent innovation. It tamed it. Oman and Bahrain share a common philosophy: growth without aggression. For them, success doesn't have to be spectacular. It's enough if it's clean. In a world that rushes, they slow down. In a region that shouts, they listen. And that's exactly why they matter. Because they show that you can create progress without destroying what was there before. That you can have technology without arrogance, business without greed, ambition without hubris. In the evening, when the heat fades, Muscat and Manama sink into shades of blue. Lights come on rooftops, monitors go dark in offices. The silence that follows isn't the end of the day, it's its reward. In that silence, you can hear something you don't hear in Dubai or Riyadh: gratitude. For calm, for balance, for time. Because Oman and Bahrain know something others are still learning. The future is not a race, it's a conversation. And maybe that's exactly why from these places, from quiet offices by the ocean, from desert valleys and modest co-working spaces, will come the projects that truly change the world. Not through advertising, not through spectacle, but through meaning. Because silence can be revolutionary too. Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, Jordan, and Lebanon. Innovation in the shadow of poverty and hope. On the map of the Middle East and North Africa, these countries seem far from the center of attention. They don't have Saudi oil, Qatari money, or Dubai's infrastructure. But they have something you can't buy: stubbornness. Their startups aren't born from luxury, but from necessity. Not from government grants, but from life. In Tunisia, Morocco, Algeria, Jordan, and Lebanon, innovation is not a conference buzzword. It's a reaction to poverty, crisis, and lack of prospects. In Tunisia, everything began with a revolt. It was here, in 2010, that a street vendor, Mohamed Bouazizi, set himself on fire in an act of desperation, triggering the Arab Spring. His gesture changed the region's politics. But today, in its shadow, something quieter is growing. A startup generation that wants to change the economy. In Tunis, Sousse and Sfax, incubators and small tech centers are springing up. They look nothing like their counterparts in Dubai. They're shabby buildings with sun-cracked windows, where a handful of young people with laptops are trying to imagine a better world. In 2018, Tunisia became the first Arab country to pass a Startup Act, a law that gives young people the right to take risks, tax breaks, the right to take a leave from a job to start a company, support for social startups. The result? Dozens of small tech firms, from health apps to clean energy projects. In Tunis, the air smells of fatigue and hope at the same time. The city doesn't have money, but it has youth. Programmers sit in cafes, drinking sweet coffee and connecting over unstable Wi-Fi with partners in France, Canada, Poland. Their ideas aren't global. They're local, practical, honest. They help farmers, students, families. Tunisian startups don't promise billions. They promise that tomorrow will be a little bit easier. Morocco chose another route. There, innovation blends with tradition. Casablanca and Rabat saw the first tech centers emerge even before the pandemic. Royal support programs, investments from France and Spain, and local technical universities helped turn the country into one of Africa's quiet startup leaders. But it's not the capital that is the heart of this change. It's Marrakesh, a city of chaos, color, and sound, where, in the alleys of the Medina, IT firms operate next to spice shops. Moroccan startups have style. They mix the creativity of artists with the pragmatism of craftsmen. They develop apps to manage markets, modern tools for tourism, education platforms, green tech solutions. In a country where many young people earn a few €100 a month, entrepreneurship isn't a choice, but a survival strategy. And yet, from that chaos, a structure is emerging. Morocco Numeric Fund was established to finance local ideas. In 2023, Morocco ranked among Africa's top 5 countries in innovation potential. Not because it has money, but because it has people who refuse to give up. Algeria is a different story. There, technology is still fighting against the concrete of bureaucracy. But even there, under layers of regulations and fear, something new is sprouting. After years of isolation, the country is slowly opening up to startups. The government is creating incubation programs, and young Algerians, mainly from Oran and Algiers, are founding companies despite limited access to capital. Algeria Venture, a state-backed incubator, is operating, along with several independent organizations. Most of them are self-funded or supported by family. In a country where youth unemployment hovers around 30%, every app is a tiny revolution. Algerians don't believe in politicians' promises. They believe in their own hands. Their startups are often informal, operating without licenses, but they work. In garages, on markets, in homes. And despite poverty and censorship, hundreds of new projects appear every year. This isn't Silicon Valley. It's a valley of courage. And even though the state still doesn't really trust young people, the young stopped waiting for permission. They act. Jordan, in turn, is an example of a country that has managed to build an ecosystem despite limited resources. A small state surrounded by conflict, it became a safe haven for businesses from the region. In Amman, Oasis 500 was founded, one of the Middle East's oldest startup funds. This is where Maktub was born, later sold to Yahoo for $164 million. Jordan invests in education and in women. Half of its startups are led by women who, in other countries, would never have had such a chance. It's a place where every idea has a right to exist, even if there's no capital yet. Jordanians have something the richer states lack: humility and persistence. They know they won't beat Dubai or Riyadh, so they don't try. They focus on quality, on niches, on stability. Their firms don't grow at breakneck speed, but they endure. In a country that lives between desert and refugee camps, technology has become a way to breathe. For many young people, a startup is the only path to freedom, economic and psychological. Lebanon was once the pearl of the region. Beirut was called the Paris of the Middle East. Today it's a city of ruins, power cuts, and endless crises. And yet, in this darkness, glimmers of light remain. In damaged offices by candlelight, tech companies continue operating, refusing to give in to disaster. After the port explosion in 2020, many startups lost everything. But some survived. Kamkalima, online education, cardio diagnostics, AI in medicine, Toters, logistics. Today, they are symbols of Lebanese resilience. Beirut is a city that knows the taste of collapse, and that's why it knows how to get back up. In a country without electricity, with a collapsed currency and mass emigration of youth, technology has become a form of rebellion. Anyone who opens a business is basically saying, I refuse to give up. And maybe that's why Lebanon, despite poverty, still has one of the most creative startup ecosystems in the Arab world. The common denominator for all these countries is a simple, raw realism. They don't believe in miracles. They believe in ideas. Their startups have no big campaigns or multi-million budgets. They have people who can't sit still. For them, innovation isn't a luxury, it's a form of survival. And despite poverty, instability, and political chaos, something is happening. Quietly but relentlessly, the Middle East and North Africa today are a laboratory of contrasts. On one side, Neom and drones. On the other, Cairo without electricity and Beirut in ruins. But innovation is growing in both worlds. Because technology doesn't need marble or gold. It needs a person who will say, let's try again. And that sentence, repeated in Tunis, Marrakesh, Algiers, Amman, and Beirut, is today the most beautiful sound of the Arab economy. Women of the Middle East, a quiet revolution without slogans. Not every revolution has flags. Not everyone needs street protests. Some begin with a single gesture, clicking register company. Women in the Middle East didn't march onto the streets with banners, they logged on. To the internet, to co-working spaces, to labs, to startup incubators. They did it quietly, but effectively. They are changing the Arab world not through confrontation, but through work. For decades, a woman's place in the Arab world was defined for her. Home, family. But in the 21st century, that started to change. In the UAE, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, Jordan, and Qatar, more and more women are starting their own companies. Not to fight men, but to co-create the future. Their entrepreneurship is not aggressive. It is patient, practical, attentive. It's a revolution without slogans, but with results. In Dubai, women now lead almost half of tech startups. The government supports them with grants, and society, more and more often, with trust. Over time, people there have learned that a woman in business isn't a threat, but an asset. In co-working spaces in Dubai Media City, men in dish dashas and women in black abayas sit side by side, building apps for payments, health, logistics. In a world that for centuries separated genders, technology has become neutral. The screen doesn't know gender, neither does code. In Saudi Arabia, what's happening now would have been unthinkable just a few years ago. Women drive cars, start companies, employ men. Social reforms opened the door, but it was women who walked through it first. In Riyadh, women-led startups have emerged in health, fashion, e-commerce, and education. One of the symbols of this change is Rima bint Bandar, who founded a company promoting sport among women and now represents the country as ambassador to Washington. Others have created platforms helping women find jobs, learn to code, run businesses. In Egypt, women never had it easy. But in Cairo, where the streets are loud and the system stubborn, they've learned to act anyway. Many startups in education and social impact bear women's faces. One symbol of this change is Rania Habib, co-founder of a mentoring network for women in tech. In a world where tradition often smothered ambition, women have learned to carve out space on their own terms, not through confrontation, but through consistency. Jordan is another case, small but open. In Amman, women make up half of startup founders. The government supports their education and entrepreneurship with scholarships and funds. This is where the first Arab mentoring platforms for women across the region were created. Jordanian women are known for determination and meticulousness. Their projects don't rely on flashy slogans. They rely on logic, precision, and quality. And maybe that's why so many of them succeed. In Qatar, women are part of the scientific elite. In Education City, they lead research teams, study AI in labs, and build tech startups. In a country that has long tried to connect modernity with conservatism, women have found a golden mean. They kept tradition but didn't freeze in it. Today, Qatar has one of the highest proportions of women in science and entrepreneurship in the Arab world. In Morocco, women are entering innovation through culture and design. In Casablanca and Marrakech, fashion, cosmetics, and eco-startups are being launched by women who want to combine tradition with modernity. In their hands, a piece of cloth, natural oils, and a QR code become one project, Arab luxury in a new edition. And in Tunisia, where the Arab Spring began, women in startups are now a symbol of courage. Many lead social organizations that teach other women basic business skills. This revolution has another dimension, spiritual. Because women in the Arab world aren't just changing the economy. They are changing the tone of the culture. Their presence in startups isn't only about equality. It's about changing the energy. Less hierarchy, more dialogue. Less zero-sum competition, more empathy. In companies run by women, there is more local hiring, more cautious investing, and more long-term thinking. It's a kind of business that doesn't burn out from within, but grows quietly. Today, women in Middle Eastern startups no longer ask whether they're allowed. They ask what's next. They write their own manuals of success, mentor the next generations, launch their own funds, build their own networks. Their strength lies in the fact that they don't want to imitate anyone. They are building their own model, one in which success doesn't mean domination, but harmony. In the evenings, in the offices of Dubai, Riyadh, Cairo, and Amman, when men leave for prayer, many women stay at their desks. They finish projects, write code, send emails. It's not rebellion, it's determination. Quiet, but unyielding. Sometimes one click is enough, one startup, one woman, to change an entire country. And it is they, in abayas, jeans, headscarves, no makeup or in high heels, who are now the real face of Arab innovation. Not the futuristic towers, not the labs. Women, the quiet architects of a new future.